everyone. I hope everyone is okay. Can you all see? I hope that's all good. There should be comments, but there's no comments. That's fine. Hang on, let me have a look. So we'll get started in just a couple of seconds. So while we are, oh, I know, that's why. While we're just waiting for everything to, everyone to join and everything, you can start getting all your bits ready. So on your palettes, you're just going to need black, white, and a bit of red, and a little bit of yellow as well. Hang on, let's see if that will make any difference. Chat is disabled. Hang on, I'm just going to get the live chat open so that you can ask questions, because that's always really helpful. No, it's not my case. No. Okay, well that's weird. Unfortunately, I can't get the comments to work, but that's okay. If you have any questions, please do go on to Facebook, and if you've got Facebook Messenger, I can have a little look on that. Let me just have a look one more time and then we'll get started. So for those that don't know what brush parties, if you've never done this before, we're going to paint this lovely poppy field step by step. So you'll be shown everything on this canvas, and we'll start with the background, we'll build it up, and yeah, it's going to look really good. And obviously we're supporting the Poppy Appeal this afternoon, so please do donate to the Poppy Appeal if you can and are able to. That would be wonderful. Yeah, for some reason I cannot get that to work, but anyway, I hope that you're all okay. Yeah, we're going to start with the background. We're going to start by mixing a little bit of white and black together, so mostly white. So you're going to need some brushes for this and some water as well. So my water is over here. And I've also got brushes. So you're going to need a big brush for your background. So I have got these brushes here. You might have the same, you might have something slightly different. That's absolutely fine. So I've got a large flat angled brush. I've also got a smaller angled brush. These are going to be really good for like painting the poppies and everything. We've also got a pointy round brush as well. So this is going to be good for some of the smaller like buds of poppies and like the closed up ones. So if you don't have all those brushes, it's all good. You can literally just use whatever you have at home. And you can do the portrait, landscape, you can do it on a massive canvas. It is completely up to you. I'm working on a 16 by 12 inch canvas, so it's nice and small, but it's going to look quite effective. So whenever you're ready, grab your large brush. We're going to dip it in a water. And if you've got some like kitchen roll or something at home as well, maybe grab some kitchen roll or a napkin, just so you can sort of clean off the brush and dry it as we go. And if you're using acrylics, you want to water down your white slightly. So I'm going to take a little bit of white and I'm going to put this on a new part of the palette. And I'm going to squish the brush down side to side like this, so that it's just going to loosen it up a little bit. And then I'm going to add a little bit of black. So we're also live on TikTok as well. So if anyone's watching on TikTok, you're welcome to join as well. We're going to paint a lovely poppy field. If you want to get some paints out and a canvas, you absolutely can. But yeah, so start with a really, really pale grey, like the palest grey you could possibly get mixed up without it being just white. So I'm taking white over, I've got the water, mix the water in with the paint, and then I've added a little bit of black. I've got something a bit like this. Now what we're going to do is load up the brush and hold it horizontally like so. And I'm going to go up and down from the left all the way to the right, and I'm just going to do random messy brush strokes so that some of them come down really far, others only come down a couple of inches from the top, and we're just going to fill all the way across the top. Now if you start to run out of paint and you get halfway through and you realize you sort of run out of that colour. You can mix up a bit more, but you don't need to stress if it's not quite the same colour as like what you've been using previously. It's actually really nice if you get a little bit of a different sort of shade as you're going through. So basically, you can't go wrong with this bit whatsoever. And if you would like to put like hints of green and things going through, then you can do as well. So you could make it into like more of a natural field look. So you could do like blue sky, you could do green in the grass, you can do whatever you like. But this is almost like, it's just quite a messy, staggered sky at the minute. So all the brush strokes are slightly different lengths. Yeah, and we're going all the way across. So if you are working on a canvas and it's got edges, always looks really lovely if you can paint around the sides and along the top as well. I obviously wouldn't worry too much about the bottom edge because we're not quite there yet, and it will probably just stick to whatever you're painting on. So I'd wait till the end and you can paint the bottom edge as well afterwards. So just running the brush down, and I'm using it widthways, so that I'm getting nice thick brush strokes. Now if you do get like a big dark line going through, it's all good because you can just add a bit more white over the top and you can blend it out, or you can just leave it in there, and it's all quite nice if you get a mix of different shades. Like I said, if it starts to go a bit dry, grab a little bit of water, mix it with your paint, and yeah, just keep going over it. But you don't want to overwork it either. So there's definitely a point with paintings where you can start overworking your background. So I'm going to do a little bit more just to finish that side. So I've only really gone down to about halfway for now. If you want to maybe just take a photo of what you've got so far. I know it's not a lot, but it's always quite nice to sort of see the first couple of stages that you go through. And then, yeah, as we work our way through, take some more photos as you're going along. So for those that are joining on TikTok, this is just like a little run through of what we do at our brush party events. So if you do have a canvas at home and you'd like to paint along, then you're welcome to do that. Please do have a look at our page as well. It's always nice sort of, if you have a little look through, you can see what we do at our public events and stuff as well. Okay, those on YouTube, I hope you're okay. I hope it's going well so far. It's quite a nice, easy, relaxing painting, this. But if you do want to put like loads of bright colours through it, then you're absolutely welcome to do so. So we don't want to leave this to dry for too long because it works quite nicely when it can blend with wet colours. So when you're doing the lower part of the canvas, it's nice for it to blend, and it works better when it's wet. So I'm going to dip my brush back in the water. Just to sort of get off all that really pale colour, and I'm just going to mix up the same sort of shade but just add the teeniest bit more black, so it just goes a tiny bit darker. So start by mixing up a bit more of that same shade first, just so you've got more on the palette. So I'm taking more white, like putting it into that same part of the palette that we were just mixing on before, just to loosen up the white, and then I'm going to take a little bit of black, mix it in. But with black paint, it usually is quite pigmented, so you don't really need a huge amount, and you definitely don't need as much as you think you normally need. So just take a little scoop, move it over, and we're just going to aim to go like 1 or 2 shades darker. And I'm going to press my brush side to side so that I can really get the brush filled in. And now we're going to start from the bottom and work our way up. Now you can do a mixture of horizontal brush strokes and horizontal brush. You can do vertical brush strokes with a horizontal brush and also with a vertical brush. So if you have a brush like mine, which has got long bristles on one side and shorter bristles on the other, then the best thing to do is to, if you're going to hold it and do these sorts of brush strokes, like the pointier, longer ones, you want to guide with your shorter edge of your brush. So because we're starting from the bottom, I'm going to do a couple like this, my brush horizontal. And then every now and then, when I want to do some nice taller, more blended grass lines, I'm going to turn my brush upside down. So I've got my long bristles pointing to the bottom, and I'm going to lift upwards. Now, for this bit, it's really nice to have a bit of a blend. So if you're finding that your colour is really, really different to your sky colour, I wouldn't worry too much. Oh, hi, Lucia. Hello. I wouldn't worry too much if it's a little bit contrasted at the minute, but it might be nice just to do a little bit of a patch, and then once your paint's run off your canvas, off your brush, and or if you want to just wipe it off, get some of the excess off, you can. And you can use a slightly drier, emptier brush to just blend what you have. So you could just really gently run a horizontal brush like this over the top, and you'll find that would just blend stuff a bit more. Or you can go for more white. Of course, yes. Please do paint along if you like to. This will be on YouTube as well, so we're currently live on YouTube and on TikTok. So if you're watching on TikTok and you need to go back to the beginning, please do feel free to join on YouTube as well, and you can watch that whenever you want to. But the background of the sky was literally just a really pale grey, so you can't go wrong. So yeah, you want it to sort of be darker along the bottom half, and we're just sort of doing these mid-tones. Another thing you can do to blend is to use white paint. So if you feel like you want to blend a bit more and that dry brush isn't working, then just wipe off the excess paint, grab a bit of white, and then go over the top. And that'll also give you some nicer like highlights as well. So you could do the white to brighten up the sky and also brighten up the bottom. So do a little bit of everything. And there's so many different ways to blend. So it's not just like a one rule for everybody. It's like, have a little go. If it works, it works. If it doesn't quite work, then you can try a different technique. So I'm going to mix a bit more of my darker colour, do a couple of brush strokes with the horizontal brush, making sure I'm getting right to the bottom of the canvas. And I'm doing a couple like this, and then I'm also going to do a couple when I turn the brush vertically with the long bristles pointing down. And we're going to just add some nice flicky lines. So these are for like the blades of grass that are in the background, the more blended out ones. And the ones that are going to be darker and slightly thicker and a bit less blended, they're the ones that are more in the foreground. So these ones, this is like the practice round before we get to the slightly more delicate ones in the foreground. Now, if you do want to put different colours in, I'm going to keep reminding you that you can, because it will look lovely if you all do different colours. And you can obviously put these poppies anywhere as well. So when you get to the poppy bit, if you want to do loads and loads of poppies, you can just go for it. You can do so much with this painting. Or you can keep it really empty and quite simple. I quite like the simplicity of the composition, so I'm going to keep it quite empty. And yeah, I think less is more with this. But it would be lovely if you can like put them up on the wall, take some photos. And if you, especially if you have donated to the poppy pin as well, it'd be nice to know if you have done that. So yeah, you can tag Brush Party as well. So if you're on TikTok and you are painting along, please do give us a follow. It'd be really helpful. And if you're on YouTube, then please do post on our Facebook page. That'd be great. Or Instagram or anywhere. So I'm just going to mix up even more paint. I've just got this last little bit in that bottom right corner to do. Make sure you really load at the brush on both sides. That's going to give you a really lovely, soft effect with the brush. If it's a bit too dry, it ends up going really fuzzy and dotty, so it doesn't quite look as effective. There's a difference between a blended brush stroke and just like a fuzzy, empty brush that's made that brush stroke. So I'm going to do a couple more flicks with the length of my brush. I'm going to turn it this way around so I've got the long bristles pointing down. I'm going to do a couple of flicks, just adding a couple that are maybe a little bit more prominent. And you can slightly lean them different ways as well, so they don't have to go perfectly straight. So you might want to get like some brush strokes that really break up the direction of paint. So you've got a few that just twist and curve slightly different ways. So what we'll do is we'll let that bottom bit dry for a little bit longer before we put some of the next layers on. And I'm just going to brighten up the sky a little bit. So I'm going to take a little bit of white paint on my brush, and I'm just going to hold it horizontally. And just in the middle of the sky, I'm going to pull down a couple of neat white brush strokes like this, just to add a little bit more of a filled in sky in the center. It's also going to be really nice to blend out some brush strokes. If your grass is looking a bit too harsh in some places, just use the white. And if you notice, I'm not going up and down with the brush stroke, I'm just starting at the top and then pulling down like this. So I'm always starting from the top, and that is just going to soften everything in the center. But I think this bit is a bit optional. Like if you've already got quite a light background, you don't need to really do much else. You can just have a bit of a relaxation time for 5 minutes, let your paint dry. I think I wanted mine to be a little bit lighter in the center of the sky and then a little bit darker towards the corners, just to add a bit more focus towards the center. And if you end up doing too much white, you can always go back in with like a little bit of a lighter grey, and that's completely fine. So yeah, once you have done the sky and a few white brush strokes and the bottom part of your canvas, so this mid colour, then you can take another little photo. And we're going to go on to the slightly darker greys now. So we are going to use the brush mostly horizontally. So we're going to use quite a few thick brush strokes. This is still like mid layer in the field. So for this, I would actually suggest loading up the brush and then wiping quite a lot of it away. So you need a wet brush. So you want to dip it in the water. Mix up a slightly darker grey than before. So you still want the same consistency and everything that we've like sort of done previously, but we're going to empty the brush quite a lot. So I'm going to wipe it on the edge of my palette like this. So it's still nice and sort of creamy, but there's just less of it. So when I put this on, hopefully it's not going to like spread too far. So I'm going to hold it on its side, and then just in a few random places, I'm going to brush upwards. So you don't need to press very hard at all. You want to keep this really gentle. So hold your brush at the handles almost pointing up as well. That's going to be quite nice. They don't necessarily all need to start at the bottom either. So this is just like shadows in between blades of grass, really. It's not necessarily individual blades of grass, if that makes any sense. So yeah, make sure you don't have too much on there. If you're finding that it is just coming out way too dark and way too thick and it's just not going so well, then what you can do is maybe go back to a slightly lighter colour, maybe just add a bit more white into the colour, and you can brush over the top, or use a completely empty brush and go over it, and that will blend it out. So I've used the brush mostly horizontally, but doing up and down brush strokes, kind of ignoring the layer that we've done underneath, so that you're getting a nice random mix of brush strokes. Yeah, it's really hard to know when to stop with each layer because you don't want to overdo the background, because it'd be nice for the poppies to really stand out on top. So I would definitely just every now and then take a little step away from your canvas, make sure you're not overdoing anything. Might do a little bit more on this side. Because you can always add more. I mean, once the poppies are on, it's a little bit trickier to add more, but it's always the case that you could just do a couple of little bits within the background if you need to. Okay, so we'll do a couple of the same colour brush strokes, but or the same colour paint, but we're going to change the brush strokes ever so slightly. So we're going to hold the brush back vertically again with the long bristles pointing down like this. And I'm going to just choose a couple of places to add in some slightly more in focus lines. Again, these ones don't necessarily have to start from the bottom, so you can do a couple that are slightly higher up. And it's all about the flick with this as well. So when you get to the top of the brushstroke, rather than just pulling off the canvas like really harshly, you want to use the pivot of your hand to flick the brush up, and that's going to give you a really lovely like fade at the top of your brushstroke. So like make sure you start with the handle pointing sort of slightly upwards, and then when you get to the end of your flick, push the handle down, and that's going to really give you that nice flick for the blade of grass. Okay, now I might be starting to overwork that slightly, so I'm going to stop there. If you would like to maybe go in with a couple of white brush strokes, if you want to brighten up any patches in the bottom, very similar to how we did in the sky, like if you want to lighten some areas. Now is a good time to do it before we put some of the poppies on. So you've gone for the horizontal brush, vertical brush strokes for the darker colour, and then turn the brush, and we've done some going more vertically with the vertical brush. And then if you would like to brighten up a couple of areas, you can go in with the neat white paint, and this is for these sorts of areas, so it just adds like a little bit of highlight in the lower part of the painting, which is quite good. So I think in the bottom left corner, that's quite nice to have a little bit of a slight highlight. Obviously, you're welcome to sort of paint these in between your brush strokes that you've already got on there, so you don't necessarily have to use the width of the brush. If you've got smaller areas, you could turn the brush slightly on its side or turn it completely vertical, and that's quite nice. I'm really hoping that everybody watching on YouTube is okay, because I can't see the comments. Oh, so typical. But yeah, if you do have questions, the best thing to do is either to send us a message either by email, but I will pick it up much quicker if it's via Facebook. So if you have got something that's not going quite right, or if you're wanting to change something, pop a little message on Facebook and I should see it come through. But I hope that you're okay so far. And if anyone's watching on TikTok, you're welcome to paint along. There'll be a recording of this out as well on YouTube. So I'll leave that for a second. Might be good to let it dry once you've done some of the white bits. Take a little step away from your canvas. If you're painting with like watercolours and things, you can also have a go of watercolours. It's very similar in the techniques. Obviously, you just won't be picking up acrylic paint, you'll be picking up watercolours. So rinse off your brush and let this dry. So you've got lots of ways you can dry a canvas. You can use a hairdryer. You can literally give it a quick blast with the hairdryer, or you can waft it. But you do want this to be completely dry before we put the poppies on. Because what was that? Somebody on TikTok. Okay. That made me jump. Right, so yeah, we definitely want it to dry, because the poppies need to have a completely dry base on it so that we can get the nice see-through effect. If your background is slightly tacky, when you go to put the poppies on, they're probably going to pull some of that white through. And if you've got white in the poppies, they're going to go more solid. So they won't have that really nice, soft see-throughness. Okay, I hope that everyone's okay. Yeah, if you do want to waft your canvas as well, that is another way to get them dry. So you can just take it off your easel and flop it around a little bit. And make sure you've got a photo. So the poppies are really quite fun to paint, and I'm really excited to do it. So you can use either of your smaller brushes. So you might not have the exact same as mine, but you might have something similar. So the round brush is really good for sort of adding the smaller, finer details to your poppies. Whereas this brush, like the medium angle brush, flat one, is quite good to get that whole shape in fairly quickly. And it's a good way to get like thin, even brush strokes, as in thin paint, and make it nice and even. With this one, because the paint sort of bunches up as you do your brush stroke and it gives you thin lines, it's a bit tricky to get that like a larger area covered with an even tone, if that makes any sense. So I probably recommend to start with the medium angled brush, or even your big brush if you like. That's absolutely fine. Depends how big you want your poppies to be. And we're pretty much going to be using the whole shape of the brush to get in the shapes of the poppies. So yeah, whenever your background is dry, mine is pretty much there, we can move on to the poppies. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of red first. You don't really need anything else apart from water. So we're going to water the red down quite a lot to make it a bit more see-through. So I've got my water on my brush. I haven't dried it off on the tissue or anything. I've just dipped it straight to the side of the red, and I'm pulling it out to the side. So I'm really trying to aim for more of like an inky consistency rather than like thick paint. Now, if it's too watered down and you've got too much of it on the paint, when you go to put it on the canvas, you're probably going to get a drip. Now, you don't really want drips, I don't think, for this. So what I would probably recommend is just to, like, once you've thinned the paint out, give it a little wipe on the side of the palette just to take off any excess drippage. So you can maybe even just test it on that. If you tip your palette to one side, if it trickles down, then you've probably still got too much on your brush. So just keep tapping it off. And then I'll show you the poppy on the left first, because that's a nice open one. We've got two nice big petals. So I'm going to start with the dot first. So the base of my poppy is going to be just around like the halfway mark. So if you find halfway down your canvas, go slightly in from the edge. I'm going to just place a little marker around there. So a little dot. I'll do mine a bit bigger so that you can see on the camera, because that usually helps. And then what we're going to do is hold the brush vertically to start with the long bristles pointing down, which can sometimes be a bit tricky when you've got watery paper because it tends to collect at the long point of your brush and it can drip. So definitely either tap it on the side of your palette, tap it on the tissue if you need to, just to catch the drips. And then when you're ready, you can pull the brush up vertically, pull it across to the side, add a nice little wiggle, and then twist the brush and curve it in. So you basically do an outline first, and then you can use the width of the brush to just pull a nice even coat of paint in. Now that is just red by itself. So if you notice, the red on here has a slightly richer colour because there is also a little bit of yellow mixed in. But I'm doing red first, just as like a little bit of a marker, so we're quite happy with placement, and then we can make it a little bit bolder and add the red into it, the yellow into the red in a second. So yeah, it's that sort of fanned out shape. There's pointy at the top. You can obviously go back over and just adjust things a little bit, but I wouldn't overwork the petal once you've put the paint on. When that paint is so thin, if you then put your brush over the top, it can sometimes pull it off and it can pull off the layer underneath. So you've got to be a little bit careful while it's still wet. So I'm then going to do the same sort of thing, but I'm going to pull the brush over to the left slightly, add a bit of a wiggle, and then pull it inwards. And then use the flat edge of the brush and just literally colour that shape in. And once you've got that technique of doing the outline, I mean, you could do the outline with your smaller brush and fill with the bigger brush if that's easier. You're absolutely welcome to do so. But for example, like this one here, which I am going to add a little bit of yellow for, because why not? It might be quite nice to get the orange on. You can add a little bit of yellow into that colour. It just warms it up, makes it a little bit brighter. Just remember to water it down quite a lot though. I'm going to let this one dry before putting the yellow at the top, because like I said, you can overwork it when it's super duper thin. So I'm using my really watered down now orange paint like this. And I'm going to start a little bit further to the right and sort of a little bit higher than the first one as well. So for this one, because it's a bit smaller, you can just use the shape of the brush to literally paint in the shape of the petal. A little bit too red. A bit more red on there. Yeah, so you can literally just paint it over and add a nice random shape. So this one's kind of got like a rounded top edge, and then it's got a point, so it sort of hooks over on the left and drags in like that. So you can be really random with the shapes, and if I bring this one a bit closer, you'll be able to see that later on, when we put this one here, we put a slightly thicker bit of paint on over the top once it's dried, and that is what makes it look more see-through. So far we've literally just got the base layer, but yeah, it's going to transform quite dramatically when we put the other bits on. But you do want to get a really smooth base, or as smooth as possible. Mine has gone a little bit patchy. I'm going to just blend that a bit more. Trying really desperately not to overwork it, so I'm trying to press very, very gently. Okay, and then for the one, like the other big one over on this side, I'm going to load up my brush again. I'm going to go for a same orangey sort of colour, so a bit of red, a little bit of yellow. So it's got that, like, it goes more of a richer red orange rather than like a pink colour. So if you do the red by itself, it is quite pink. But yeah, super watered down. I've not got too much on the brush. And this one is like one of the main focus ones, so it's quite a big one. So I'm going to start with a dot, and I'm going to put this just off center to the right. So the middle is about here, but I want to not have anything too close to the middle. So I'm going to go a little bit to the right. I'm going to start with a blob to mark the center. And then I'm going to add in just one petal at a time. So I'm going to turn my brush upside down and I'm going to pull upwards. You add a little bit of a wobbly line for the edge of your petal and curve it round. They can be any shape, almost looks like a little butterfly. It's quite cute. But before the outline dries up, pull the brush towards the center so you get these lovely lines. Blend it in. And you should still be able to see a little bit of the background. Okay, so that's one side, water. And then going out to the left as well, so you can do the same sort of thing. So drag the brush over to the left. This one's got a really wobbly, jaggedy edge. And a slightly pointier bottom left corner. And drag that inwards. And then it's got one petal pointing to the bottom. So actually that one on the right hand side's got a bit more of a curve at the bottom there. And then one at the bottom, which is just sort of like poking out down here. So I'm going to do a little flick so that you've got that little like hooked over bit, this little pointy section. And then it joins up to the other petals. Almost looks like a little bow. I might just round off this one here. I think it's a bit too much on a diagonal to start with. There we go. That's a little bit nicer. Be happy with that one. It's quite big. Okay, and then we've got some smaller ones. So I'm going to go back to just maybe a bit more red on the brush. I'm going to make the paint slightly thicker for the ones that are a bit more fuller in the lower half, so they're not quite as see-through. So sort of just underneath the one we've just added, I'm going to do a very similar sort of shape to the one over here, the second one in. I'm going to pull the brush round. The more wobbly you do the edges of your petals and the more intricate those wobbles are, the more detailed it's going to look. And it does come to life very quickly. If you do really perfectly rounded edges, it just makes it look a slightly more cartoon style, which is also absolutely fine, but it does look nice if they're a little bit more jaggedy. So that one was quite a nice, quick, easy one. I think this is definitely the point of trusting the process. It's not quite there yet, but it does look all right. And then we've got a couple more, like the open petal ones. So this one is quite a nice, like traditional, like open poppy shape. So we've got a dot somewhere on this right hand side, not necessarily perfectly in line with either this top one or this bottom one here. So I'm going to go somewhere in between the two. And this sort of opens out from, say, about 8 o'clock all the way around to about 2. So we're kind of filling this whole half circle on a diagonal. And it's slightly smaller than the top one, but slightly bigger than this smaller one down here. So you've got all of them ever so slightly different sized across the canvas. I forgot I keep moving my palette. I forgot that I've moved it. And then we've got another small little petal to the side. Now I know I'm going quite quickly with these shapes of the poppies, but there really isn't a right or wrong like composition. You can put them all over the background. You can literally do really, really big ones. You might even just have like one single poppy in the middle. That is completely fine. You can do whatever you like with this. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about being absolutely perfect. And they do look completely different when we put the next layer on. Now we could add a bit of blue to our palettes for the very last layer to make the colour slightly more purple. But if you haven't got blue, you can just use black. But I will show you both so you can see. So this one up here is quite a nice one as well. So similar sort of consistency as the one that I've just done down at the bottom. And this one is sort of in between these last two here, these two. So find the gap between them, come upwards, and this is the tallest one. So I would recommend having a couple lower down in the grass and then also a few that are just above. Just so that both halves of the painting sort of come together. If they're too separate, or if you do all of them in the lower part and then nothing in the top, the composition doesn't quite work as nicely. So this one is just another sort of standard petal shape. There's nothing too crazy about it, sort of like a V shape with a bobbly top. And then the side is just like a little brush stroke of an extra petal sticking out the end there. So I would let all of those dry for now. We can put the medium brush back and don't want to do that. If you end up putting your brush stroke onto your canvas where you're not supposed to be putting it, leave it, turn it into a poppy. I'm not going to rub that out. I'm going to turn that into a petal that's going off the edge. Sometimes with acrylics, it's just quite nice to not worry too much about the little accidents because it's so forgiving. You can just add another petal. Okay, so for the next ones, where we're letting this dry, we're going to use a smaller brush if you have it. You can also use the medium brush because that is a nice one that you can use to get like the smaller little dotty ones. But I do think that this one just works that a little bit better. So if you do have the option of a small round brush, I would grab that now. These ones are the closed bud-like poppies, so they don't have to be as watered down as the other ones that we've been putting on. So I'm just going to use the neat red by itself. When you're loading up the round brush, rather than just dunking it in the paint, what you want to do is twist it round side to side so that you load it up from the base all the way to the tip. So these ones are literally just made up of one brush stroke. So what you want to do is find areas within the painting that are a little bit empty. So for example, like up here, there's not really much going on. So I'm going to put a little brush stroke, just literally adding the tip of the brush to the canvas and then pressing, and almost like using the shape of the brush as the shape of the petal. So you literally just press and it's that stamping that gives you a really lovely flick. If you did want to make it look a little bit see-through, you could then use a little bit of water and just pull off some of the paint. I'm going to leave it like that because what I'm going to do is rather than add highlights, I'm actually going to just add shadows later on. But yeah, all right. So we can carry on doing a few of those. If you want to add a little bit of yellow into them as well, so you can have slightly more orangey ones as well as the red ones, you are absolutely welcome to. Yeah. How's everyone doing on YouTube? Are we all okay? Hi, Holly. Was that Holly? Hallie. Hello. My eyesight is terrible. Hello, Hallie. So yeah, this is what we do at brush parties. This is like an online, obviously, it's an online event. We go to pubs and stuff, we go to venues and we paint paintings and everyone paints along. So if you do have anything at home you want to paint with, feel free to join and paint along. This is all in aid of the poppy appeal as well. So yeah, carry on by adding in those nice little specks. They can be tilting all different ways. If you notice, like poppy buds often are sort of tilted down, so you can put them different angles. So that one is definitely pointing upwards, but some of them can be pointing down like this. This one's really drooped over. So I'm going to do a couple. Oh, thank you for the follow, by the way. Yeah, please do have a look at our page. We've got lots of different events on there. Okay, so yeah, somewhere in the middle, I'm going to do this nice drooped over petal or bud. It's almost like a water droplet coming down, so it's thinner at the top, opens into a nice bud shape. and you can put them really randomly throughout. If you want to do like one like this one, if you can see the one right on the edge, it's kind of got two buds to it. You've got like a little flick with a petal and another one. That was done with a small brush. So in this gap over here, oh no, I keep doing that. I'm going to do a little tap and then another one next to it. So you've got this nice V shape. So if you do end up doing anything like this, and if you do want to get the paint off, if you've got wet paint on top of dry acrylic, what you can do, add water over the top. This is literally magic. This is a really good little trick for anyone who is clumsy like me, who does get paint everywhere. You can water it down, and as long as you don't press too hard, you can just add a little bit of tissue. And 9 times out of 10, it comes off right away. It's great. I mean, ideally, you want to try and not be too clumsy and not get paint in places where it's not supposed to go. I don't think I could have turned that big long brush stroke into anything. But yeah, I'm going to add in one more little bud petal. So one just over on this right-hand side. Is that all of them? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 on there. The red ones, yeah, and then we've got a few dark ones. We'll put the black ones in at the end. So hopefully by now these first layers of petals on our poppy should be relatively dry. So what I'm going to do is carry on with the smaller brush, and we're going to start adding in the shadows. So a lot of the time, what makes like flowers look more natural is really emphasizing the shadows rather than pulling out all the highlights. Sometimes when you think of highlights, you want to add like white to things, but for this, we're not going to add any white to these flowers. If you want to add highlights, you want to add yellow rather than white. And then for the shadows, if you did want to add blue into them and get slightly more purpley tones, you can do. I didn't put blue out initially, but I'm going to put a little bit on my palette now. So if you do have blue and you'd like to add it now, then feel free to pop some on your palettes. You can get the same effect. I've got paint in my hair, I can feel it. You can get the same effect by using a little bit of black with the red, but sometimes it can go fairly brown. So I'm going to show you both so you can decide what you prefer. I think this one was a mix. Mostly was with black. But yeah, so do make sure that this is fully dry before you go on to this next bit. Best way to test is to just tap your fingertip, and if you get lots of paint on your hand, it's obviously still a bit wet. So we'll start with the first one so we can work our way across. I'm going to keep going with my small brush, and we're going to use the paint a little bit less runny. We're going to go for more of like a creamy consistency. So for those that have joined on TikTok, hello, nice to see you. This is like a paint along brush party. So if you do want to paint as well, feel free to grab a canvas and paint some brushes. Yeah, so I'm going to go with a little bit of red. I'll show you with the black first, just so you can see, because there's not a huge difference. I think I'm just being really pedantic. So a little bit of red, tiniest little bit of black to make your colour a little bit richer. It makes it more of like a cherry red, like red wine sort of red. It just makes it, if you can see, I don't know if you can see, it's the tiniest bit darker, but when it goes on the canvas, it makes quite a big difference. So the darker bits are usually where you've got petals overlapping each other, or if it's just more in shadow. So on this very first one, I'm going to do a couple of brush strokes just along the bottom edge, and I'm going to start going upwards like this, so that the brush strokes are sort of fanning towards the tip of the petal, like so. If you want to blend a little bit, you can rinse off the brush, tap it on a tissue so you've just got a slightly damp brush. You can then use the side of it and just very gently pull a little bit of the dark colour into the light colour, like that, and it just, having that slightly darker colour underneath, it just blends it out a little bit, makes it look a bit more realistic. On this one, if I bring it a bit closer, there's quite a lot more black along this left hand side here. So it's quite a thick line, and that is because there's another petal sort of around the other side. So I'm going to really load up the brush. I'm going to do a brush stroke on the top on the left side, and then a really thick one, and it's about the edge. Can you see that thicker line going through the petal? That is what makes it look a bit more 3D as well, and see-through. So I'm going to go for a little bit more black in the colour. I'm going to press just a bit harder on this left side. And if you tap it as you're going along, you can get a really nice wobbly sort of edge. And they all just join into the centre like that. So I don't really want to blend that one out too much. I quite like that to be a little bit harsher. And then I'm going to do a little flick along the top. I am going to blend that one out there because that one doesn't look so good. And this one was just the red base coat. So if you did want to add like a little hint of orange, you could go back to adding a little bit of yellow, maybe even just yellow by itself with a little bit of water, and use that as your blending tone. It's going to give you that even more realistic layered effect. So I'm using that yellow to pull that out. That's why sometimes using the black can be better, because if you then put yellow over the top of like blue and red, it can go very green. So yeah, that was that one here. Just that little hint of yellow does look quite nice. Makes it look a bit more like a little bit more see-through. You could even do a couple of dashes with that yellowy colour over the top as well. A couple of ridges. But it's just about getting the balance. So you don't want to go too dark or too light. Just somewhere in the middle would be absolutely perfect. But we'll leave that one for now. We'll move on to the slightly bigger one. Or no, that's like we'll go on to the small one to the right a bit, because this one's still a bit wet. I can't wait to do this one though, because it's looking messy. It's at the questionable stage. Can't wait to change that. So for this one, it would be really nice to make it look like we've got another petal overlapping. So I've gone for a really rich, slightly orangey red. Rather than adding black this time, I'm just using thicker paint. And what I'm going to do is add, from this right-hand side, I'm literally going to paint another petal, sort of over the top, like that. And then I'm going to water my paint down, water my paintbrush, tap it on the side, and I can take a little bit of this colour. You can like soften the inside a little bit. And you can then use a little bit of leftover paint to just make the edges a little bit darker. You'll find that on flowers, the edges of the petals, especially if they're sort of coming forward, they are slightly darker. So if you found that your petals earlier were maybe just a little bit neat and not very bobbly, you could also re-add those back in, so you can make more bubbles, more pointy bits. And there you go, a slightly see-through flower. Now that I've done this one, I feel like this bit here is a bit questionable, so I'm going to use that same colour and just fill that one in. For some reason that was really purpley, even though I haven't used any blue yet. But it's just made it a little more consistent. Now what's nice is that you can do another layer once it's dry, but I wouldn't overwork things, because we're using the paint so delicately, you don't want to overdo anything. So it's basically the same technique on all of these flowers. So for the bigger ones, obviously you can use more paint, and if you did want to use blue, the big one's a good one to test it on. So you could take a tiny dot of blue, mix it into your red, maybe even a little bit of black as well. But you find that when you do the blue, it makes it a slightly more purpley shade rather than going more brown. So I've got relatively thick paint there. We want to make sure that this left petal here is looking like it's the one that's more in the front compared to the two on the side. So what I'm going to do is start with an outline that runs down the middle of the poppy. So I want to leave a little bit of a pointy bit here. So that is that left poppy coming in front. This is the dark bit, and what we can do is flick the brush strokes going out like we did with our first one. Do a couple of flicks coming inwards. You got a nice mix. And then you want to make this bottom one quite dark as well, so you can do a bit more of a underline and fill that in. It's all about being patient and not overworking anything too early, which is really hard to be patient. But yeah, so if you then wanted to just add, like literally just red to your brush rather than any other colour, you can add a slightly different, thicker bit of paint to the left one. So obviously with the black, it's like a shadowy colour. If you use just red or even just an orangey-ish sort of shade, that makes it look more like it's in the foreground or slightly further in front. So you could add a little bit of yellow into your colour as well, and have some orangey bits coming through. So you got that like change in colour is quite nice, but just don't add any white at all. I mean, you can, it'll just be a very different style. That's completely fine. But yeah, as soon as you've got a little bit of paint on, you can blend a little bit, but you don't want to overdo anything because you can always just add more once it's slightly dry. But sometimes when you put too much paint on top of wet paint, it just sometimes it doesn't work. Depends on what sort of paints you have though as well. I know, especially for these paints, it doesn't like being overworked. You don't quite get the right effect. So I've got this little patch left, bottom right corner. That is looking a little bit questionable, so I'm going to go for a little bit of a yellowy red. So it's got a little bit of a highlight. And if you want to blend anything, you just overlap your brush strokes. Like so. It just makes it look a little bit shiny. I've just seen your comment. Thanks. I mean, you can paint this as well. It's all good. It's all step by step. So if you want to paint along, you absolutely can. But thank you, appreciated. How is everyone? I can't even ask how is everyone getting on because I'm not going to see your replies. I think this is the only YouTube one that we've done where the comments haven't been on. It's very frustrating. But anyway, I hope that you're all doing very well on YouTube. Keep taking photos. I know I'm going relatively quickly, but it's all the same sort of steps. So I'm hoping that you're following along okay. They really come to life when the black goes on. That is like the main little bit, which is quite fun. So for these bottom ones, we're going to keep them quite see-through, but they're just a little bit darker. So I'm going to water down a darker red. I'm not really going to use much orange. I'm going to use a little bit of this darker, like red wine red, but I'm going to water it down a tiny bit so it's not so thick. And I'm just going to make the middle parts of these flowers a little bit darker. So I'm going to go around, basically filling in the bottom left corner. Maybe even adding a couple of lines, and the lines just make it look a bit more ridged and things. So it just adds another layer of detail without having to do too much, which is quite good. But yeah, that one's quite a loose one. There's not a huge amount going on. And then with this one on the right, I'm going to do a little bit just on the edges. So this is all slightly darker in the middle, and then you can do a little bit of dark around the edge, and then do a bit of blending. So you've got a nice soft transition from the dark colours through to the light bits. I mean, you could add some orange in there. Yeah, okay, I take it back. The yellow does look quite nice in that one. You're allowed to add it. If you wish. I will allow you to add the yellow in that one. I think the yellow is just generally quite a nice colour to put, I guess, throughout most of it, because it just warms up the colours. You just want to be a bit careful that you don't overdo the yellow. So all I did there, sorry, I got completely in my own little world. All I did was use the rest of what I had on my brush and just filled in this petal, because it just looked a bit empty compared to all of the rest. And because I knew it had dried, I just went ahead and did it. I'm so sorry. A little more on that one as well. Okay, that's better. So we've got this other one in the top left corner. I think this one's my favourite one, this top right hand one. So we've got this dark corner and this darker bottom right bit. But as you can see, there's like a few different colours in there. There's quite a lot of different shades going on. So we've got, I'll just show you on this one first. We've got a red line which brings this the right petal in front, so we can get that shape in. Then you can fill that one in. Maybe add a little bit of red to the edge of the top one, and then we can swap to the dark colour and add the dark bits at the base and to the side. So if I go back to my one, I'm going to use the red paint, slightly thicker than we have done before. I'm going to pull this extra petal over the top of what we have been of the previous one and paint over the top. So you can kind of see that outline going through that, and you can also see that going over the top. So that makes it look nice and see-through. And you can also add that same sort of thicker red just to the top. And that makes it look a bit more realistic. Maybe even a couple of dashes coming down for some ridges. Then you want to go for a darker colour. This is definitely quite a dark colour. I'm going to do a nice brush stroke down the left side, mostly just starting from the top and brushing down. And it's all about the swoop of your brush. So you start at the top, and as you pull it down, lift off nice and gently, and you get a nice fade. If it doesn't quite blend as easily, then you may just have to go back to a little bit of water or a slightly damp brush, and that will work. And then we can neaten up this bottom bit with the same technique. So it just looks quite cute. If you want to repeat that, like when the rest of the poppies are dried, if you want to go in with any more dark colours, you can maybe just do like a second coat of dark colours to make them a bit more emphasised. And you can also go over maybe even the lower parts of some of those buds as well. So for example, this one, that really dark, rich red, if you just do it underneath and to the side, it makes it look a bit more 3D. And like this one up here. Obviously, if you feel like you've done enough on the rest of them, then you definitely don't want to overwork it. As I keep saying, it's one of the hardest things to do is to not overwork painting. It's really hard to know when to stop. But I would just take a minute or two to go back over any that you might want to just like make a bit more contrasted, or even just go over the colours again just to make them a bit more vibrant. So I've just gone back over my overlapped one here with a bit more red, because sometimes the colours dry a little bit differently to how when you first put them on. So some of mine are dried up relatively light, so I'm going to just go over with a second coat of paint. I'm really not using too much at all, because I don't want to make them like overly contrasted, but I do want some of those shadows to just be a tiny bit darker than what they are already. Even if it's just like one brush stroke just going around some of the edges. but I would say it's most of the middle bits, or where the center of the poppy would be, which isn't necessarily in the same place on each one because they're kind of all facing different ways. And this is just a darker red. So if you've made that with like the darker, like made it darker with the blue, or you've made it with the red and black, and that is, either of those are absolutely fine. And you can blend out with a little bit of water or using your other colours. Or you might find that you actually want to add more orange to your poppies, and that's also absolutely fine. I'm hoping that it's all going okay. If you're unsure if you need to add any more or not, I would recommend not adding too much more. You can always go back to adding more bits afterwards. So now we're on to adding the black. So it doesn't mean that has to be the end. If you want to go back in with like other stuff, you can do, but the black is a really good way to just tie everything together. So we'll start with just using the small brush normally. So just use the tip of your brush, a little bit of black paint. You need a little bit of water in it. We're going to add some of these dark buds. So like we did with the red ones, these are going to be sort of placed quite randomly through your background. So you want a couple that are tilted like over, so you can sort of tilt the brush, add a little flick. You can do a couple that are a little bit smaller maybe. They don't have to be the whole size of the entire brush. You can just have like, if you just press really gently, they can be slightly smaller. I feel like I'm missing some, oh actually, no, I'm going to leave those for now because it'll fill up quite a lot when you add all of the grass in. So for the grass, you have the option of either using a small brush, or you can go back to your medium brush. It's completely up to you which ones you want to use. They're all like, everyone has their personal preference. Some days I love the small brush, other times I can't stand it because it doesn't do what you want it to do. So you want to just maybe have a practice. But if you are going to use the angled brush, there is that one rule where you guide with the shorter edge of a brush, drag the long bits behind. So if you're going to be starting at the bottom and dragging upwards, you want the long bristles pointing down and flick the brush upwards. Now, it's a really good brush to use if you've loaded it up nicely. If you've loaded it up and you've got like bunches of paint around the base of your brush, it becomes a little bit tricky to use because if you press too hard, the paint does just like clump off, which we don't want it to do. So what you might also find actually is turning it upside down, like the whole painting, and you might find that having the long bristles pointing up and dragging this way might feel a little bit more natural. I definitely prefer that way because your hand naturally, like your arm goes down that way. So it does work quite nicely. I am going to use my small brush because I feel like that one is going to work better for me today. And you can also, with the small brush, you can add in these curved over brush strokes as well. If I bring this one closer, you can see that we've got a few, like especially where you've got the buds, you can press and then pull the brush down. Forgot I actually had paint in this brush. I was lucky I didn't do it anywhere else. Yeah, you can add these nice curved ones, and you haven't got to worry about which way round you hold the brush because it's a round brush and you can just do it all over the place. And if you have a look on these ones, this is a mixture of a really thin, gentle brush stroke and then like pressing a little bit harder, so adding a bit more pressure and then lifting off. It gives you quite a nice technique. They are just like thicker blades of grass, sort of twisting as they're going upwards. So there isn't really any particular places they need to go. So you can go a bit crazy with this bit, do whatever you like. I would say the flowers will need a stem, but they don't excuse me, need to go all the way from the flower all the way to the bottom. So you could just do a little hint of the start of a stem and then fade it off. Stems are really hard to do. I think stems are harder than grass because they just, for some reason, they just are to me, because it has to keep going like that. So I quite like to just add a little hint that there is the start of a stem, and then you can fade it off. I feel like there's just a lot of pressure with the stems because it has to look like it's coming out of the flower, whereas with grass you can just sort of put it anywhere. Now if I bring this one a bit closer, if you're feeling like you want to do the dots at the same time, you can do. And I think this one's my favourite one. So you can do the stem and drag it down, and then you can dot and add a few speckles into your flower at the same time, which is quite nice. And if you want to make it look a bit see-through, like we've been doing, a nice way to do that is to water down your black, or like once you've done the dots, you can dot with the black and then get a bit of water and then tap and blend them out. So I'm going to go for it on this one. I'm going to do a little dash sort of coming down. I'm going to do a couple of dots right in the base of this flower. So they start really clumped up together and then they spread out as they go upwards. That makes it look a bit more 3D. And then if you want to make it look like it's see-through as well, by adding a tiny hint of water, not too much that's going to drip, but just adding a little bit of water to the top ones, kind of blurs them a little bit. It's subtle, but it looks good. And then yeah, if you want to add like the watery ones maybe to the closed ones, where you wouldn't necessarily see like the whole inside of the flower, you're just sort of seeing the shadows through the petals. I would do that with a slightly watered down black. Which is quite nice. Maybe even using your fingertip like that to smudge some bits. But yeah, so for the grass and things and the stems, they can go all different directions. Some of them are really curved over, so you can literally just put them all over the place. Especially the buds, if you've got them really hooked over, you want to show that they're like that because of the stem. That's quite nice. And they can cross over quite a lot as well, so you can do a couple that are sort of going this way and some going that way. Nice dashes. If you water down the black as well and have some that are like slightly see-through, that is also a really nice way to build up the like the layers. It kind of makes it look like you've got lots going on when all you're doing is just adding water. So I have given you so many instructions in a very short space of time. So I will kind of repeat stuff as I go as well, so that you can see what I'm doing at the same time as me explaining it. So that one that I just added was one of those ones where you start lightly with the paintbrush, then you press harder, make the brush go a little bit thicker, and then you lift off again. That's quite a nice leafy one. That's a really good way to fill in any major gaps that you've got. If it's looking really empty and you're not sure how to fill it and you don't want to add any more petals or anything, then you can just add a few thicker leaves and that's going to be fine. Yeah, maybe a couple of thicker ones as well. I would say the thicker ones are probably going to be longer than the smaller, thin ones, just because it makes it look like they're slightly more in the foreground. But if you want to add some, rather than like see-through black ones, you could also add a bit of grey into these as well. So you can do a few slightly darker greys compared to the ones that we did right in the background. Maybe even some white ones as well. Oh, or red, apparently. Managed to just get red on there. Whoops. There's lots of little things you can do, like even green. If you wanted to add green and you haven't added green yet, that would also look really quite nice. Oh, but yeah, don't forget about doing the dots on the other flowers. Those are quite important. But I really hope that you're enjoying this so far. I hope that they're looking good. I hope it's not too stressful. The thing with the petals is the less you do on them, the more effective they're going to look. They will look better if they're all quite like see-through-y kind of consistencies with a little hint of a shadow. That is going to be great. And then it's when you put the black on. So for example, this one here, this really dark, thick one, like the really big poppy, because it's like an open front-facing poppy, you're going to see quite a lot of those seeds in the center. So I'm going to do lots of closed up dots, close together, and then I'm going to spread these out so the dots become a bit less clumped up the further out you go. Now I think I could slightly alter the shape of that petal by bringing the black out a bit, just to make it look a bit more don't know what I was going to say there. A bit more realistic. So I started talking without really thinking what I was actually going to say. And I want to separate. This is a different petal to this one. So I'm going to use the black to separate them. And carry on those dots. Because why not? I think that has just made it look a little bit more 3D. I'm going to do a couple more dots on these smaller ones. But yeah, this is a really lovely way. If you do obviously export the poppy peel and you want to put some stuff up on the walls, it would be nice to put in your window display, maybe like at home, put it in the living room. Don't know where else you can put it on the wall, which is quite nice. Or if you're in an office, maybe putting it up in your office is a nice way. Yeah. If you did donate, thank you very, very much. I will also be donating as well after this. But yeah, I really hope that it's been quite a nice way to like spend a Sunday afternoon, isn't just sort of painting, not really having to think too much, and it's for a good cause. Okay, I've kind of forgotten about this accidental petal over here. I think I might just add a slightly darker red into that one, because this was my accidental brushstroke when I was being very clumsy and I knocked my paintbrush. Okay. Now it looks like something. Looks like it was kind of meant to be there. So yeah, once you've done those black lines and the black leaves and everything, if you want to add any more details in your flowers and things, now's a good time to just add those final bits of detail. You can even add some splatters to it. I always think splatters look really nice in paintings. So for that, you can use a little bit of water, a little bit of black, and you can add some splatters. That's quite pretty. It's a nice way to just, again, fill in gaps, make it look nice. White dots would look quite pretty as well. But yeah, most important thing is signing your canvas and taking a photo of your final painting. So for those on TikTok that are watching, this was just a really kind of introduction necessarily into what we do at Brush Party. We do lots of step-by-step painting events in lots of venues across the country. We do lots of online events as well. So if you do fancy having a go, please do take a look at our Facebook page, our TikTok page, our website, Instagram. Do give us a follow on everything, because that'd be great. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you at some events very soon. So I'll end TikTok now. Thank you all very much. Bye. And then for those on YouTube, thank you very much for joining. I hope that you've enjoyed yourselves. I love this picture. I think we might do this in venues. I think it's going to be quite nice. We'll see. Yeah, thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And we'll see you for some more events very, very soon. Bye.